Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwara, Gurureva Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Chinmayam Vyapyat Sarvam Trailokyam Sacharacharam Tadpadam Darshitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Tvameva Mata cha Pita Tvameva Bandhuscha Sakha Tvameva Vedya Dravidam Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva. Yata sarvani bhutani pratibhanti stitani cha yatraiva pashamam yanti tasmai satyatmane namaha. So I think we figured out we're on page 26, third chapter, verse 28. Is that correct?
Verse 28,
28.
verse 26.
Yeah, that's right.
Page 28, verse 26. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. So Ganesh, will you help us out this evening?
Yo Jagarti Sushupti Tatho Yasya Jagratna Vidyate Yasya Nirvasano Bodhaha Sajivan Mukta Uchyate. He who is awake while in deep sleep, for whom there is no waking, and for whom the perception is free from past mental impressions, that is, the perception is free from the knowledge derived from memory, is said to be liberated by living.
So we're again proceeding with this section where we are describing the Jivan Mukta, the person who's liberated while alive. It's an echo of the Sthita Prajna Purusha section of the second chapter of Gita, the marks of the man or the woman of realization. So the first idea here sounds really weird. Read the first phrase for us again, Ganesh.
He who is awake while in deep sleep, for whom there is no waking.
That's all. That's fine. That's fine. So many people used to think this means, oh, Swamiji never sleeps. He just lies down and he stares at the ceiling. He never sleeps. No. What it means here is an understanding of who we are, this shift in our identification, and what deep sleep is. Many of us think we are unconscious in deep sleep. I'm not sure what we mean by that. So let's parse this. Let's pull it apart. Awareness is a constant. Awareness illumines the three states of mind: waking, dream, and deep sleep. The best way I can explain it is deep sleep is not like being blind. Deep sleep is like seeing darkness. There's a difference. If I turn off all the lights and close all the drapes and the room is blacked out, you are seeing darkness. You can't see anything that's going on. If you try to walk across the room, you trip over the table. If the room is fully illuminated and someone's blind, they cannot see. They have no sight. But if the room is dark, you are seeing darkness. So look around in the room and now close your eyes. Are you blind? No. You're seeing the back of your eyelids. We also illustrate this through what we call the law of memory. The law of memory is that the rememberer and the experiencer must be the same entity. You cannot remember something you haven't experienced. Who here knows what I had for lunch? None. Why don't you know? You weren't there. Do you know what you had for lunch? Yes. Who here slept soundly last night? You did? Did I sleep soundly last night? Which means something was there to. Now I'm an old person, so I have to get up in the middle of the night to pee. Mind comes awake, off to the bathroom. That is like seeing darkness and someone lights a match. Instantly you see it. If you were unconscious in deep sleep, nothing. So we have no mentation in deep sleep, meaning no thoughting. There's no time. Any of you have the experience, you wake up in the middle of the night, you have the faintest idea what time it is. Yeah, I have to hit my talking alarm clock. The time is 4:23 a.m. I graphically illustrate it this way. This hand is like the self. This is the mind. Waking state, dream state, deep sleep state. I watch carefully. Samadhi. 5 returns. Oh my gosh, there's nobody there. That's what happens. So here, first idea is the man or woman of wisdom knows I am that eternal illuminating factor. In deep sleep, I'm not unconscious. I'm conscious of the avyakta, the unmanifest. What's the next idea, Ganesh?
For
There's always
whom,
fake.
For whom there is no waking and for whom the perception is free from past mental impressions.
For whom there's no waking. Well, that seems like a total contradiction. What do we mean by that? For the ordinary person, the waking state reality is like a dream. What happens in the dream state? First, we have, technically, we call it a Varana Shakti, veiling power, meaning I go to sleep. Then comes Vikshepa Shakti, the mind projects the dream state. Now, what are the essential elements of the dream? I'm not talking about its various content. I have a dream body, and from that dream body, I have a locus of perception. I look out from that dream body at the dream world. And I have a dream ego. So I'm identified with that dream body. I think I am the dream Jim. And there's a world of name and form outside, and a world of thoughts and feelings inside. Isn't that our experience in the dream state? But that is all created by the imagination. And what the scripture is saying is that our ordinary waking state reality for the person in spiritual ignorance is like the dream, meaning I think I'm Jim, this body, and I think there's a world out there with joy-giving and misery-producing qualities. And I have struggles. I have to get this, that, and the other thing. I have kartavya, obligatory actions. That's a dream. So the woman or man of realization has awakened from the waking state. Never forget. Aham Brahmasmi. I am that ground of being. What's in front of me is a light show. Seen. So they are never awake, meaning they do not enter into the dream of the ordinary person's waking state. What was the last idea in that part, please, Ganesh?
The perception is free from past mental impressions.
There was part before that. Who said who is never awake, and then what did it say?
For whom there is no waking and for whom the perception is free from past mental impressions.
Yes. So here it means vasana. So we have the word vasana used here. What is a vasana? Depending on the scripture, sometimes it's equated with sanskara. In this text, as in the work of Shankara, there's a distinction. Sanskara is an impression. We could not function in the world without them. Do you know this is a lamp? A newborn baby doesn't know it's a lamp. It has no sanskaras yet. You know that's a table. You know that because it's an impression. Those do not cause us to suffer. But a subset of sanskara is vasana. A vasana is a special kind of impression, which is left in the unconscious as the result of previous egoistic actions, meaning the qualities of I-ness and mine-ness are involved. I do this action which has brought me joy. I did that action which got me in trouble. I love my widget. I'm sad because my widget broke. I-ness and mine-ness. These vasanas have a very subtle but important power. The first power of a vasana is that it robs us of self-experience. Meaning, this veil of ignorance comes down, and in the mind, I forget. I do not know who I am. How do I know that my mind is under the influence of vasana? I think I'm a person. It's that simple. How do I know the mind is free from vasana? It's very clear to me. I am that ground of being. Aham Brahmasmi. Chidananda Rupaha, my form of this consciousness. And if you are in that state of knowing who you are, then the world remain in form. Does not afflict the mind. You see it for what it is. So the mark of the person who's Jivan Mukta is all of the vasanas of the past. All of the vasanas have been annihilated. Any thoughts on this? It's very important. Sometimes in scripture you will see vasana and people kind of infer that it means like a desire. The desire is the effect of the vasana.
So on liberation, the samskaras aren't annihilated. It's just the vasanas.
Doesn't matter. They're not problematic. They're not problematic. They're not problematic. They do not. The important thing to be mindful of is, am I aware of myself as Brahman, or do I think I'm a person? If I think I'm a person, then I need to do the scrubbing. What's the scrubbing that needs to be done? Let go of my attachments to the things of this world and let go of ideas of self. Does that make it a little clearer?
Yeah.
Good question. Anybody else have a question about this? The annihilation of the vasanas here and now is considered liberation by the wise. That's how Shankara phrases it. All right, is that the end of this verse, or is there other pieces to it?
That's it.
All right, next one, please.
Ragadvesha bhayadinam anurupam charannapi yonta vyomavadatyachha sajaivan mukta uchyate. Though behaving in a manner resembling the presence of passion, hate, fear, and the like, he who is extremely pure within, like the sky, is said to be liberated while living.
So this used to confuse me a lot. Swamiji would say, I have no desires. And then I would see him obviously expressing desire. He loved spicy food. He loved to ride in fast cars. So this is very subtle. The scriptures will use phrases like roasted vasana. And the image they're using is, say you have mung beans. And if you get mung beans from Whole Foods or from Sprouts, and you put them in a pie tin and you soak them and you put wet toweling paper above and below them, after a while, if you keep it moist, they will sprout. You get some mung sprouts. Anybody here ever grown their own sprouts? But if you get out your skillet and you put the mung beans in and you roast, the other metaphor that's used is like a burnt length of rope. So where I see the metaphor, if you've gone camping and you have a Coleman Lantern, do people use those anymore at all? Not really. Yeah. You know what they are? Yeah. Okay. Coleman Lantern had oil in it or kerosene. What did they use it? I can't remember anymore. Kerosene. Kerosene. So it burnt that instead of, it wasn't electric. So at the top, there was like a little round goody thing with a slit in it, and you put the wick in it. And the wick was cotton and it was braided. You lit the wick, soaked up the kerosene, Coleman Lantern. That's how you, out camping, I like. Now, if the kerosene burnt out, it's all used up, guess what happened to the wick? The wick would start to burn and turn to charcoal. And it was very interesting because the wick would look like a braided piece of cotton, except it was black. But it was really ash. If you touched it, it would crumble. And does that happen with Indian lamps? I think it does. You know, if you've got lamps in your mandir home, you have a little cotton wick, the oil runs out, then the wick burns up, it stays in the little spout. You see a black burnt wick. Have you ever seen that? Mm-hmm. Yes, no? Yeah, same thing. But if you touch it, it just crumbles. Now, the reasons the scripture uses this metaphor is you can't tie anybody up with a burnt length of rope. So when we see the woman of wisdom functioning in the world, they may be enjoying music, they may be angry at something. Oh, Swamiji had a temper. In 1988, I was in Siddhavati, and he was teaching Vivekachudamani. All the brand new brahmacharis who'd taken the 2.5-year course were up there. They now have their yellow names. One of the brahmacharis had gone to the kitchen and told the kitchen staff, we're brahmacharis now, you need to serve us first. And Swamiji found out about it. And it was a volcano of rage right in front of everybody. You have dishonored the teaching. You have dishonored the Chinmaya mission. From now on, you will eat last and you will serve everybody everyone else. Scripture. And he'd stop and rail at them. So, oh, you so mad. How come he didn't drop it? Just to say, I do not get angry. I use my anger. I keep it in my pocket. I take it out when I need it, and I put it back when I'm through. So only you can tell the distinction between whether your reactivity in the world, your raga and your dvesha, is compulsory. I call it our inner 2-year-old. Or whether in fact you have gone through the practice of yoga rudha, or you've attained to yoga, or you can accept anything, you are content. Then you respond as the situation finds it necessary. But inside the mind of the person of steady wisdom, the Jivan Mukta, and completely empty. Now, remember what we said last week when we started this section. This is not for us to check out other people. Is Trevor enlightened yet? No. This is to check out our own sadhana. And if we don't have these qualities yet, naturally we practice them. Always these imply a practice. So what's the practice with this one? Stay detached from your reactivity. If your mind reacts with attachment, with pleasure, with aversion, with disgust, watch. Way to heal the mind is to get out of the mind. Why do we call it a practice? Doesn't mean we flip a switch and we achieve this stuff overnight. Very subtle teaching here. We have to be very careful that we don't use a verse like this to rationalize our bad behavior. Oh, the Jivan Mukta, he's angry or sad or joyful. I'm that way too, so it's okay. We, as yogis, first of all, attain to yoga rudha. I'm willing to do anything for the rest of eternity. I'm willing to not do anything for the rest of eternity. I accept life the way it is, at peace. And the rest you will. Any thoughts on this?
So if you ruminate on something after the fact, that's a sign that you haven't really let go.
Well, it depends on how you ruminate. So let's use an example. So let's say you give a presentation at work and you're not clear in your delivery. You didn't articulate or explain a piece of the presentation in a clear way. And you get feedback after the fact that I have no idea what you were talking about. Then after the fact, in the now, you can say, okay, how could I have done that more clearly? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But that's different than saying, how that my boss said that to me. You know, how could he have done that? You know, doesn't he know how hard I work? You see the difference?
Mhm.
Yes?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Well, the chintya, I think in modern Hindi, it means worry. Sanskrit is, how were you taught chintya in Sanskrit?
To think.
I was taught it's after the fact rumination about something, running the story over and over again, running the story over and over. Why did I do that? Why did I do that? Or the opposite. Oh, I was so good. Oh, that was really cool. Oh, that was a great presentation. Oh man, they really loved it. By the way, what did you think of my presentation? You know, can you do that? It's subtle. It's subtle. Anybody else have anything they want to share on this?
I have a question slash
Sure.
observation. I guess in the examples that you were just giving, it's possible to have a reaction that's not, well, like you were saying, like anger or liking spicy food or something like that. But in this line, they use the word hate. I don't know. Maybe
Read
it's
the
a
line
change.
again.
Though behaving in a manner resembling the presence of passion, hate, fear, and the like, et cetera, et cetera. It just like I'm having a hard time imagining when it's
I'm
when
not
it's
sure what the
possible.
Sanskrit word is. May not be a skillful translation.
That's what I was wondering about.
Raga Dvesha.
Wish.
Dvesha is,
Dvesha, that I always thought was aversion.
yeah, I think they're translating Dvesha as hate.
Raga means passion for something. Dvesha means aversion.
Okay, yeah, that makes more sense.
There's a story that I love to tell about the Zen Roshi who was invited to some big dinner. It's at a hotel. And they were serving the meal, and it was chicken. And he was a vegetarian. And it was there, and the hostess comes up and says, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I told the kitchen to give you a vegetarian plate, and here, let me take that." And the Roshi says, "No, please, let me have this." And she says, "But why? I thought you were a vegetarian." And he says, "I am, but I noticed when I was served the chicken that aversion rose in my mind." So for him, it was a greater priority to not be tyrannized by his aversion than some notion of purity. That makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
Now, you guys all do your own yoga. The Guru is within you. You'll figure this out. The overarching principle here is there's a part of the mind that is always dealing with, I want to make the situation conducive, and that's what's going to make me happy. And I want to avoid non-conducive environments because I don't want to be unhappy. I call that the inner 2-year-old. I want ice cream. No, I don't want to go to bed. Our minds haven't changed. That's the human mind. And the person is in bondage if we're tyrannized by that. If we live our lives at the effect of that inner 2-year-old. So yoga invites us to be able to let go, need to be at the effect of raga and dvesha. Now, your mind will have preferences, but that doesn't mean you have compulsions, insistence. Is your happiness dependent on the outcome? That's the point. All right, more questions or shall we go on? Next verse.
यस्य नाहङ्कृतो भावो यस्य बुद्धि न लिप्यते कुर्वतो वापि स जीवन्मुक्त उच्यते. He who does not have an egoistic disposition of the mind and whose intellect is not tainted, whether he is engaged in action or not, is said to be liberated while living.
I didn't quite catch the first phrase. Say it again, please.
He who does not have an egoistic disposition of the mind.
Egoistic disposition of the mind. Okay. So, meaning no agenda, nothing to protect, nothing to defend, no need to be right. Can you be little? Justin was telling me months ago, maybe a year ago, he realized that everybody just wants to feel important. Where did you get that from, Justin?
Emerson said the most basic human desire is the need of importance.
Yeah.
I have found it to be true, especially with
Okay,
you know how I come across those
that's
people.
fine. That's
Yeah.
fine. Anyway, that's ego's basic strategy. And that's what we want to let go. Now, low self-esteem is another form of ego. I'm important because I'm worse than everybody else. I have this issue. I have gone through this tragedy. I have suffered through this trauma. That's just the negative form of wanting to be important. So my favorite definition of humility is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. So the Jivan Mukta has nothing to prove. No longer has a need to try to reinforce or secure a personal sense of self. What's the next idea, Ganesh?
Whose intellect is not tainted, whether he's engaged in action or not.
So for the ordinary person, we're back to this idea of chintya, this after the fact rumination or vasana. Most people, when we're engaged in action, there's a running dialogue inside about how am I doing? What did they think of me? Am I okay? Jivan Mukta is gone. Can't remember who it was. It was one of my students who was studying taiko drumming. And their taiko drumming master said you need to practice drumming until you can drum like a child. Have you ever seen a little kid, like a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old, just banging on a bunch of pots and pans for the joy of it? Have you ever seen that? So we work, we express. I had a student who was incredibly accomplished singer who was about ready to give it up because their studies had all been about competitions and winning prizes. And they had completely lost the joy of singing. And my invitation was, sing for God, sing for the joy of singing. Who cares if there's audiences or prizes or any of that kind of business? And she has re-engaged and owned her art because of it. She's having fun singing. It's not about prizes. When I was teaching voice, one of the first questions I would ask singers, do you want to be a musician or do you want to be a celebrity? They're not the same thing. I can teach you how to be a musician. You may or may not become a celebrity. But if your goal is to be a celebrity, you're going to have a career filled with suffering. There's always going to be somebody better. Next idea.
That's it for this verse.
Okay, next verse.
Yasmat no dvijate loko lokat no dvijate chayah harsha marsha bhayon mukta sajivan mukta uchyate. Whom the world is not afraid of, and who is not afraid of the world, and who is free from exaltation, anger, and fear, she is said to be liberated by living.
So because the person of wisdom is little and moves through the world with this sense of love for everyone and everything, the world is not afraid of them. The world doesn't attack them. A couple great examples come to my mind. First is Francis of Assisi. He would be out in the forest. He was a man of the deepest realization, I believe. All the wild animals would come to him. He produced no fear in them. Ramana Maharshi, the same way. Animals would come to the ashram. Wild birds would come into the satsang hall. Very attractive. So it's an interesting thing to look at. Are you in conflict with the world? Do you find yourself getting annoyed with the world? Do you find yourself getting in arguments with the world? So the practice here is to have this radical acceptance of people to start with. So the world is not afraid of achievement. And she's not afraid of anybody because she has nothing that can be taken. Even if the person has lots of possessions, inside there is sannyasi, always willing for it all to be gone. No fear. No fear. Now, I can only share out of my own experience. Some people, they ride public transportation and they're always getting into conflict. For some reason, when I ride public transportation, I always end up talking about God with people. It's the weirdest thing in the world. Some little old African American lady comes up, you go to church? You know, we just start talking about God, you know. Happens all the time. Are you put off by homeless people? Boy, can you acknowledge their humanity? And our behavior then becomes appropriate for any situation. Any thoughts on this?
To the to the one who's liberated, is everything the same, like all the same to them, or is the diversity of the world still enjoyed? Like,
Go there and find out. Yes, the world with its incredible diversity is incredibly beautiful. I mean, you can go to a museum and you can see 10 paintings and they're all beautiful, but each one's different. All right, next verse.
Shanta sansara kallolaha kalavanapi nishkalaha ya satchitopi nishchitaha yes satchitopi nishchittaha sajivan mukta uchyate, in whom the huge waves of worldly existence have abated, who though possessed of parts is undivided and whole, and who though possessed of the mind is devoid of limiting thoughts, she is said to be liberated while living.
Yes. So the waves of samsara, worldly existence. Worldly existence. Here, it's like what we were talking about, the waking state of the person in ignorance. I think I'm a person. It's a world of name and form out there. Stuff that's really terrible, stuff that's really good. Go after the good stuff and beat up the bad stuff. Get away from it. All that beautiful Yiddish word, nishilas, craziness. No more struggles. Waves of worldly existence are gone. After the great storm, just the calm ocean. Though they have a mind, they don't have a mind. If I think of the mind as this Jiva Bhavana, world separate, struggle. They think they can do math. They can plan a trip for next spring. Think that they have no limiting. I-ness and minus is gone. Is that all the pieces of this one, Ganesh?
Who, though possessed of parts, is
Oh.
undivided and whole.
So you see the Jivan Mukta, and she has a body, 2 arms, 2 legs, a head, etc. We think she has parts. But her view of herself is Chidananda Rupa. Shivoham, Shivoham. I am not this assemblage of matter, I am this consciousness. Auspiciousness. Next one.
Yasamastarthajateshu Vyavaharyapi Shitalah Paratheshviva Purnatma Sajivan Mukta Uchyate. Who, though acting among the entire collection of objects, is cool and contented, as if she were acting among the properties of others, she is said to be liberated by living.
So because this notion of I-ness and minus is gone, they can be acting among the objects of the world. And there's no worry about it. As if you were acting with someone else's objects with which you had no relationship. Doesn't mean we don't appreciate it. I actually went to the Berkeley Museum on Saturday. One of my neighbors curated the exhibit. All these drawings from the 16th through the 19th century. Fascinating. Learned a lot. Had absolutely no desire to bring any of them home and hang them on my wall. No I-ness and minus. Now, how do you feel about your jacket, your car, your job, your house? Nothing wrong with having cars and clothes and houses and jobs. So many traditions invite us to take vows of poverty, especially in the West. All the sisters and monks, the classic vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. Remember that from your Catholic days? There's no virtue in poverty. There's a huge virtue in non-ownership. All is mine to use. None of it is mine to own. Inside job, the inner sannyasi. Sannyasi is a renunciate of giving stuff up. There is a tradition in India that anyone, no matter what your ashrama, your station in life is, you can internally take sannyas. One of the marks of that is you actually wear orange underwear. So interesting. Shivaram, who was Swamiji's personal attendant, who wore white dhoti, stuff like that. hardly ever spoke. One time he was wearing a dhoti, South Indian style. It was very, very thin cotton. And I could see underneath. It wasn't like a pair of jockey shorts. It was like almost like a loincloth thing, bright orange underneath. Oh, that's interesting. Interior sannyas. Yeah, you don't have to wear orange underwear. You can if you wish. But be a sannyasi inside. Enjoy the world. Next verse.
जीवन मुक्तिपदं त्यक्त्वा स्वदेहे कालसात्कृते विशत्य देहमुक्तत्वं पवनोस्पन्दतामिव. Having abandoned the state of liberation in life, and his body is left at the disposal of time, he enters the state of disembodied liberation, just as the wind attains to the state devoid of motion.
Yes. So for the person who's liberated while alive, the time comes when the body's prarabdha karma is ended and it falls down. And then the subtle body goes back to the subtle elements. It's just like when the wind has stopped, everything is still. There is no return. The cause for rebirth has been removed. Now, we have to be very careful here. Some yogis are very good at getting rid of all their attachments. But they don't realize they've hung on to a lot of aversions. And one can go into this state of where life is just, oh, I can't wait till I realize that I can get out of this world and I never have to come back again. Oh, it's such a funny farm. It's just a zoo. Oh, I can't wait till I get out of this. That's an indication of an aversion. So the practice that we need to undertake, you have to be willing to be here, embodied for the rest of eternity. You can't yearn for disembodiment. People who are plagued by depression frequently have that. It's not really suicidal ideation, although some people even go that dark. But I just don't like life. The yogi has to be willing to be. How do we do it? You seriously don't take life seriously. Let go of concern for it. Next verse.
Videha mukto no deti nastam iti na shamyati kimpya pyapadeshya kimpya pyapadeshya deshyatma kimpya pyapadeshyatma purnat purnatara kritihi. One who has attained to disembodied liberation neither rises up nor vanishes. He does not cease to be. He is of the nature of something which cannot be designated or defined. He is of a form which is fuller than fullness itself.
So the term here is videha, videha moksha, beyond the body. And the scriptures tend to make a distinction between jivan mukta, liberated while in the body, videha moksha, liberated beyond. In the end, liberation is just liberation. Other people may see the body running around, but for the Jivan Mukta, she is Videha. Nobody. I see the glass. I'm not a glass. I am beyond the glass. I see the phone. I'm not a phone. I see the body. Never touches me. I am Videha. So focus on your liberation right here. Don't worry about what happens when the body falls. But you will. All right, next one.
Brahma Swarupa, the nature of Brahman or the Supreme
Oh,
Spirit.
is this a new section?
Yeah.
Okay.
Maha Pralaya Sampatto Sarvakarana Karanam Shishyate Yat Param Brahma Tavidam Varnyate Shruno. In the fulfillment, the great dissolution, the supreme Brahman or ultimate reality, the cause of all generative causes, which is left remaining, is now explained. Hear that.
So now the title is Brahma Swarupa. What is the self nature of Brahman? Ultimate reality. And it goes by many, many names. So now Vasishtha is going to explain what is the nature of ultimate reality. Let's hear what he says.
Chinmatram Chetyarahitam Anantam Ajaram Shivam Anadi Madhyapadyantam Yadanadi Niramayam. It is only of the nature of pure consciousness, free from things perceived, boundless, undecaying, blissful, devoid of beginning, middle, and end, existing from eternity and without taint.
Now, what's important when we get to verses like this, which point to the nature of ultimate reality, if we think of Brahman out there, I, Jim, am going to think about Brahman, which is transcendental, beyond. it does nothing to free us. So Brahman is both transcendental, beyond the beyond the beyond, and immanent, meaning it pervades, it is the very substratum of the manifest universe. As your but the creation, yep, that means it pervades you. Remember our 4 Mahavakyas. First one, Prajnanam Brahma. Brahman is consciousness. Exactly what this verse is saying. How do we know it? How do we find it? Where is it? I am Atma Brahma. This self is Brahman. So there's, like everything else, a practice implied. It does us no good to say, well, what do you think about the self? What do you think about the self? As if we're talking about a football team. No. Who sees the phone? I do. That's yourself. You have to start with your direct experience of I. Now you may think that self is your body, your personality, I'm male, I'm female, I'm gay, I'm straight, I'm depressed, I'm anxious, I'm smart, I'm stupid. All this I am, fill in the line. But start with the direct experience. I. Now, with a verse like this, how do we use it? You sit in meditation and spend 20, 30 minutes just trying to bring the mind into quiescence. And have the book open to this verse. And then with your mind quiet, still in meditation. What is this first idea? Share it with us again, please, Ganesh.
Free from things perceived.
Yourself is never known as an object. You're not going to have a meditation where I've seen the self. No. It is that by which the perceivable is perceived. I am not anything I see through the senses. I'm not the body. I'm not the feelings. I'm not the thoughts. Who is it? What is it? Who sees the thoughts and the space between them? Consciousness, beyond, free from anything perceived. This is a practice. So you can get the sense of that. Next idea, please.
Boundless.
Okay. Do I have any edges? When I have this introversion of my attention, can I find any limit, any edge, any wall, any place where self stops? Sometimes it feels like a point from which I look out. Sometimes it feels like this vast empty space. Reason is because it's outside of space and time. But it is bound. Don't believe me. Look. See whether or not this is true about you. Next idea.
I'm decaying.
Do I ever diminish? Do I get wrinkly? Oh, I looked inside and myself started to get wrinkles. No. Body, yes. Oh, myself used to be 10 quarts. It's down to 8. No. Oh, myself is sagging on the left side. No. Most terrible circumstance happens in the world. If you can stop, look within and notice yourself. It does not touch. Of course, the greatest thing in the world happens. You look within, that didn't touch I either. Next idea.
Blissful.
So we've got to be very careful with this one. We have the word ananda, which is usually translated as bliss absolute. And people tend to think this is an emotional state. You know, we hear stories of Ramakrishna and all that. I think the best way to translate ananda in the beginning is no sorrow reaches there. Physical pain gets as far as my body, emotional suffering gets as far as my mind, doubt gets as far as my intellect. But I'm empty. So why do we call it ananda? Bliss. Just like when the waves in the storm quieten down and merge with the ocean, they become the peaceful ocean. So also, the mind lets go of its agitation. Comes home to the self. Mind becomes blissful. This goes by many names. One of my favorites is Atmanamana, to revel. So, Ramananda Rasa, the juice of the bliss of Brahman. The fool thinks I need the objects of the world to get my little 2 cents worth of happiness. Person of wisdom knows it's my self-nature. The world isn't good or bad, it's just void. But I am Purna. Next idea.
Devoid of beginning, middle, and end.
Yes. Same idea as eternal. I can't find a time when I began or am ended. It just is constant. Next idea.
Existing from eternity.
Yes. Self-explanatory. I am Atma Brahma. This self is Brahman. Is that all of this particular verse?
Final ones without taint.
Without taint?
Yeah.
Yes. Without anything in it. It's clean, clear, pure. Nothing is there. And this self that is you and Brahman, which is the ground being of the whole universe. They are the same thing. Okay, we'll end here. Sorry I went over a few minutes. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamabhaya Purnameva Vasishtha. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Sri Guru Pyo Namaha. Hari Om.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you, and thank you, Ganesh, for chanting. Was Shweta here tonight? I guess not.
I don't think so.
Thank you, Jim. Good night.
Thank you,
Good night.
Jim. Good night.
Thanks, Jim.